Hello, everybody. Welcome to SPMinar, the Society of Prop Managers webinar series for live theater prop professionals. I'm so glad that you all have joined us today. I'm Cass Westover, SPAM member and the head of props at the Joffrey Ballet Company, which is party to an IATSE CBA. SPAM, short for Society of Prop Managers, got its start back in 1994 when a small but mighty group of prop folks in the Midwest came together to tackle shared challenges and make sure props had a seat at the table alongside other production departments. Fast forward to today, and we're a thriving group of over 150 professional prop managers and educators from theaters, opera companies, and schools, all connected through an international network. We share resources, swap tips, troubleshoot problems, and support each other with everything from safety info to continuing education. Like our past SPMinars, tonight's session is pay what you can. Any donations go directly to supporting these programs and our annual grants for early career prop professionals. And if you're able to chip in, we'll drop the link in the chat. Every little bit helps, and we're super grateful for your support. Just a heads up, live transcription is on for today's webinar, so you can follow along in real time. And don't worry if you miss anything, we're recording the session and we'll share it later on our YouTube channel. As we go along, please feel free to drop any questions in the chat. We'll save some time at the end to go through them. And now it's time for the good part. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on what it actually means to work under IATSE, the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees. We'll start with the basics, what a union is, how we got here, and then dig into what you can expect from a CBA, or Collective Bargaining Agreement. The benefits of working under one and why job titles and responsibilities can look wildly different from shop to shop. We have a range of perspectives in our panel, so we'll start by asking each of our panelists to give a brief intro. Monique, let's get started with you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here at SPAM. I'm one of those founding members from 1994, and I'm still lurking around in the shadows. I am currently the operations manager for Infinite Scenic. We're a scenic artist company, paint scenery for Broadway and any old theater. I'm also the treasurer for IATSE Local 21 in Newark, New Jersey. We cover Essex, Union, Middlesex, Ocean, Mercer, and Somerset counties in the state of New Jersey. So we're stagehands and of a membership of about 350 people and 22 contracts covering that. I also I have a BA in theater and an MFA in stage design. So that's where I came from. And now, as a union officer, I'm proceeding with all of this. So that's
Great.
me.
Thanks. Natalie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Kearns. I'm currently the head of props at the Grand Theatre in London, Ontario, which is just between Toronto and Detroit. I am a member of IATSE Local 828, which is the only local in IATSE that covers solely scenic artists and prop makers. So we're a pretty unique group of people. 828 covers all of Ontario, and we represent about 100 members and 13 contracts ranging from commercial scene shops to regional theater, opera, and ballet. I am the recording secretary for our local and have been doing that job, I believe, for about 2 years. And was honored to represent our local at the IATSE Quadriennial this past summer, or I guess whenever that was, summer in Hawaii with Monique. We survived the tsunami there together. Yeah, I'm excited to dive in and chat about all things IATSE.
That's great, thank you. We have a couple of other people who aren't going to be like highlighted, but hopefully they will pipe in with some stories and other little bits of information. Karin, would you introduce yourself? Oh, sorry, Lori first.
Okay.
Hi, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Harrison. I have been around the IA since about 1975 from back in the days when there weren't very many women involved in the IA. So that was Philadelphia around Local 8. And I worked at the McCarter Theater in a scene shop that had both union and non-union people working side by side. And I think that's Local 21. Monique, is that it? Do you cover did you cover the McCarter?
No, that's Local 8. They get a little chunk of New Jersey. I don't know how that works, but they
Huh.
do. So,
Back then, it was, I guess it was
yeah,
different.
the Barnes
Um,
own a little bit of that too. So,
right. Um, since then, I also worked in Miami around Local 545 and in Chautauqua, upstate New York, which was Local 266. And I was the non-union prop person who would get props to turn over to the union crew. And, all kinds of stories come out of that. And I moved to San Francisco upon hearing that they needed women in Local 16, which was not true, but I did relocate and eventually became an executive board member. I was the treasurer for about 15 years. I've been on the executive committee for more than 20 years, then the audit committee when I wasn't treasurer anymore, and so have been very, very involved in Local 16, which also covers stagehand work, film work, and at the opera, where I have just retired from, the prop department is all union, including the head of props, and that was me, which is also rare. So every local is different and covers what they do differently.
Yeah, thank you. Karin, what's your deal?
What's my deal? I I'm currently the prop director at the Guthrie Theater, where I manage an incredible union shop, Local 13. I'm a non-union manager, so I work alongside our union members. Um, I'm also a co-chair of our LMC committee, or our Labor Management Committee, which meets quarterly to discuss all the things that we need to discuss to keep a healthy and happy working environment for our entire team of union members and managers. Uh, Prior to the Guthrie, I was the prop director at the Alley Theater in Houston, which is a non-union shop. And prior to that, I was the prop manager of a non-union shop that worked alongside a union scene shop, lighting department, and sound department. So I've kind of, well, I've never been union. I've had a multitude of different experiences around the union, and I'm married to a proud union member. So
Oh, great. I think Lori mentioned it earlier, but just how interesting and cool it is that most of us speakers today, I mean, we have a fellow on the sideline, Larry Heyman, but uh, it's a panel full of women, which in the IA is not exactly common. So, hi, and you're welcome. um, okay, so I'm just gonna get started. Just briefly, I mean, a lot of you might know this stuff, but we're just gonna start at the beginning. What is a union and why should you know about them? There are a lot of reasons why they were started. Higher wages and better benefits. Union workers often earn significantly more and are more likely to have employer-provided health care and insurance plans, and retirement plans. Improved working conditions. Unions advocate for safer workspaces, leading to fewer accidents and injuries. They are the reason we have the 8-hour workday and the 5-day work week. Job security and due process. They provide protection against unfair dismissal and discrimination. Economic equality. Unions help narrow wage gaps, especially for women and minority workers. And a collective voice. Instead of individuals speaking alone, unions create a powerful, unified voice for workers to communicate with management and push for positive change. So how did that all come to be? Lots of hardships. Monique is going to run us through a brief history of the union movement and the IA. Take it away, Monique.
So when the Great Depression rolled around, the climate was really ripe for some radical reform. There a lot of abuse of workers and that sort of thing. And government intervention was paramount with FDR. The NLRA, which is the NIRA, which was first, the National Industrial Recovery Act is in 1933, didn't really have a lot of teeth as a law. And so it needed a lot of reform, and enforcement was pretty weak at the time. There's Senator Wagner he was a Democrat senator from New York, implemented after massive strikes, the Wagner Act, or the NLRA, which still stands today. Well, today anyway. Was introduced in February 1935, passed the Senate in May. This is so fast how this happened. Passed the Senate in May, the House in June, and was signed into law by July 5th by FDR. It ultimately established the right to organize, engage in collective bargaining, created the National Labor Relations Board, which still exists today, sort of, and enforced all of those rights. The American Federation of Labor, the AFL, was founded in 1886, but then it was joined later by the CIO, Congress of Industrial Organizations, then established in 1935. So that all kind of came together during the same time period, right after the Depression. And these all lobbied to help develop several other laws that then subsequently down the road, the NLRA established the NLRB. It built the framework for rules regarding organizing, establishing unions, because Congress at one time believed that good relations between employers and labor was good for the United States and the economy. Imagine that. And that there should be laws governing how those proceedings would proceed. After this initial law, there were some others that came through. The FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act, was 1938, and that set up all those rules that we still have today: the 8-hour workday, federal minimum wage, exploitation, protecting workers from basic exploitation, and lasting child labor rules. Practices. Then there was the LMRDA, Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act of 1959. Now, this sort of rolled around because you've all heard of Jimmy Hoffa. There was a lot of abuse and, frankly, graft in unions and stuff. So what this law did was also called the Landrum-Griffin Act, if you ever hear it called that, was passed because of this malfeasance and exploitation of membership. The act intended to make unions more democratic, fight corruption, and hold officers accountable. And those are rules and laws that are still in place to this day. It protected the union members' rights, ensured the democracy of unions, very strict rules about how we do nearly everything, and we report to the federal government directly. Standards for elections, safeguards for the union funds, things like bonding of officers, and the Department of Labor's Office of Labor Management still stands today, administers and enforces most of these provisions. That's where, as a treasurer, I produce every year a thing called the LM2 report. And that's every dime that passes through our coffers, all incoming monies from per capita, from dues, goes through and it spits out the other side. And every dime attached to my name and all the other officers is all reported to the Department of Labor. So that's where that came from. And then later coming on was like OSHA, which we all know OSHA was in 1970. So as far as like union related affecting acts, those are the main ones. So, and the ones to look up and the ones to go to if you have questions. As a document, it's a little legalese, but it's pretty clear about things like not bargaining in good faith. What is that? What is permissible to bargain? What is not permissible? That sort of thing. So then a brief history of the IATSE, which is pretty simple. And if any of you are ever interested, go to the IA's website and click on the Union Roadshow or the IA Roadshow. Very entertaining. So the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employee, Moving Picture Technician, Artists and Allied Crafts of the United States, its territories, and Canada. Founded in 1893. My local was founded in 1894 by stagehands from 11 different cities. That was actually something I didn't know till recently. They met in New York City and decided to form the union for fair wages and conditions. Broadway, vaudeville, touring shows, and the like were sort of, I call them myself the Wild West. There was pretty catch as catch can, like they pulled people off the docks, the shipping docks and stuff, and that's where a lot of the stuff from the theaters comes from. And so this really formed a standard by which certainly Broadway then proceeded. The IA now has about 180,000 members and now covers crafts, wardrobe, props, camera, makeup, animators, video game designers, and productions assistants across film, television, trade shows, theater, sports, other live and broadcast events. There are more than 340 locals across the United States and Canada. So that's, anybody got anything, any questions or anything before I move on to, now the next part I was going to talk about that we had in our outline was how to join, how to become a member. And I list a few here. I mean, that's not to say that each local doesn't have their own method. A local should have a procedure and posted publicly, but it's not always true. And local
And that's like qualifications, like worked this many hours.
Right,
in
correct.
These venues.
Right. Or just like who to talk to. But so that goes local by local. So that's a little bit harder to pin down. But there's a few main ways. And probably the most straightforward way is when a non-union shop or venue or production is organized and everyone in that unit gets their card, gets their membership. You should know, importantly, that when something like that is organized, you should not have to pay an initiation fee. Those are waived by the international. So if the local is asking for international, or if the local is asking for your international or your initiation, that's the word I want, initiation fee, check that out because that is not how it's supposed to work. Because the IA's mandate is to organize and raise membership. So that's part of that. And then so you get and then you're made a member by that local. The second way is a person is hired by an organized venue, shop, production. And after a specified amount of time, usually stipulated in a collective bargaining agreement, they request and put in an application for membership. Sometimes you test, sometimes the requirements are in place. There could be a list of things. Now, important detail, membership cannot be required in a right to work state. That's what that means. The misnomer of the right to work makes it sound like, oh, you have a right to work. No, it just means all it means is you cannot be required to join a union. And technically speaking, most within the IA, I don't know about plumbers or pipe fitters and such, but technically in the IA, you would probably not be 100% compelled to join a union, to join. I mean, our business is a little bit more flexible like that. I don't know that that would actually happen, but in collective bargaining agreements, there are stipulations that after 30 days, a person is supposed to be offered an application at the very least. Now, what happens beyond that is negotiable, depends. Most people I know want to join because you get all the benefits. So that's an important detail. Second important detail, if you become a union member, no union or local can require you to take only union work. That is an important thing. If a local is somehow suggesting that you wait around and don't take, oh, you can't take that, that's not union. Not true. It's still America today. And that is not how that works. The third way is a person gets their name on a list and takes calls, or as they say in Seattle, works the bounce for sometimes a specified amount of time, requests an application, tests, and is then voted on by the locals membership, pays initiation fee, and is made a member. Some locals have a certain dollar figure that they have to make within a certain amount of time. Like I think in local 1, you have to make $30,000 over the stretch of 2 years, something like that. I don't know. Don't quote me. But it's something like that. Another way is a person applies for an apprentice program. Some locals have full-on apprentice programs where you step through classes. You complete the work, you test, you may or may not test. You may or may not be voted upon, because if you pass all of that, the membership doesn't get to just throw you out. Pays an initiation fee, and then you're made a member. Other national locals like 829, Larry may talk about this if he chimes in, have various tests or portfolio reviews, etc. Film and television locals have other requirements as well. I'm not as familiar with that, the broadcast side, but the live side for 829 is testing, interviews, things like that. And then another one is once you've met the various requirements, pay an initiation fee, voted upon, you're then sworn in. Boom, you're a member of the IA. Welcome. So that's
your card.
That's right. That's right. And my advice, I've had mine for 25 years, don't give it up for nothing. It's worth paying the dues. I don't work under a CBA right now, but it's worth paying the dues to keep that card, because you can always work. So then we're going to talk about the monies related to that. Local initiation fees vary, but they're generally between $1,000 and $3,000. I don't know anybody who's much less than 1,000 nor more than 3. Dues per quarter can range from $60 to $100. Right now from the IA, they're $60 or $61. But that's what the IA charges the local, and the local usually adds something on top of that. We do. I don't know if they all do. Per capita percentages vary greatly, 1.5% up to 4%. Ours are 3.5%. That is the per capita is the money that's charged off your total wages. So as treasurer, I get a report and there's a list of names, list of they made $3,000. So their 3.5% is whatever off of that. So that's how that works from this time to this time. So that information has to be trackable. I mean, this is just a treasurer thing, but a member should be able to trace that money has been taken from them. Let's see, transferable benefits. Oh, sorry. I'm getting to that in a minute. Per capita, a little bit more explanation about per capita. Some places call it assessments or working dues. I have heard it called as well. They cover the cost of negotiating and enforcing the collective bargaining agreement under which you're working. Now, back to that right to work state. This money can be charged somebody, and it's considered a minimum for negotiating the contract. They can't be asked to pay any more than what that minimum might be for that union. So what does membership get you? Representation to your employer. That's the biggest thing. I don't know of many people who are able to, sidle into their office and get, what they're, maybe what they're worth. Our business, it's hard to tell, but, the people do it for you when you're a member. Wage, benefits, working condition, negotiations, all of that. Protection from firing in the form of, sorry. Little dog. Protection from firing in the form of contractual procedure, grievance procedure, and wine garden protection. Does everybody know what the wine garden rights are? Wine garden, anybody? I won't elaborate if we're transferable benefits. You all know how those of you who might not be union have experience with how equity works. An equity actor works in this theater, in this theater, in this theater, and all their benefits go into the same place. It's the same amongst our contracts in our jurisdiction. All that money goes into that. Set rules via the CBA. You know when your hours are. You know what the overtime is. You know what the benefits will be, and other working condition. Hazard pay, double time past certain hours, things like that. And it also enforces proper classification for your employment. So you'll never be strung out on a 1099. Well, that's the US. I don't know if there's a thing like that in Canada, but that is in New Jersey, you're protected. That's illegal. If you're classified improperly, that's illegal and it's a fine to employers. Now, we're a very, very blue state, so we get those sorts of things. But anyway, a little more about classifications and right to work. Very important. They get tossed around, but they're basics about working without union protection and structure, freelance. Proper classification is important. I mentioned that about it in being illegal in New Jersey. There's a test to ask yourself if you're being classified. And there's a Department of Labor link with a super detailed explanation. But the basic questions: do you have freedom from control, behavioral and directional? The worker is free from the hiring entity's control and direction in performing the work, both under contract and in fact, which means they don't tell you when you work, they don't tell you where you work, that kind of thing. This work is outside their usual course of business. This is really important. The work performed is not what the hiring entity usually does. So that's important. And it is performed outside all of its places of business. So independently established trade. The worker is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, profession, or business that existed independently of the hiring relationship. That's a little harder to explain, but also important to know that it needs to be separate, special, particular. In short, are you making your own deadlines, using your own space, following your own rules? So that's always thing. Right to I mentioned right to work also already, but in certain states you cannot be required to join a union because you work as under an organized venue. I think most CBAs have the employer as the decider who works there, and in the theater business, firing someone after 30 or 60 days, which is common because they didn't want to join a union, would be very unlikely. That's my opinion. I'm not saying that would happen, but I just feel like that is not probably something that was happen. And most locals I know would, let's say your average Lord C or something would rarely march in and be like, they got to go. I don't see that happening. There would be other accommodations perhaps made. And that's my chunk of that. The next.
Great. Excellent.
How's that?
Yeah, I'm going to speed through this. We got a couple of great questions in the chat. A lot of practical ones, and we'll save those for the end.
Sure.
But we will certainly get to them because they are great and important questions.
Oh,
so
stuff I never knew. When I was coming up.
Exactly.
That's the big thing.
This is a little tidbit. So this is called a bug. I didn't know that for a while, and it was a little embarrassing when I found it out. But that's a bug. The symbol of.
It's like a bug splat.
Yeah, right. So briefly, I am not a card-carrying member, but I have been working in union theaters, and I've been doing all that sort of stuff. And I have a job now at a union company, yes. And so it happens differently for everyone. I know Lori was telling a little bit about her experience, and Larry too, about being in the right place at the right time. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But I'm going to talk about props specifically and other CBA stuff. So as a stagehand, outside my job at the Joffrey, I will get called to any number of venues. Once there, my job will most likely not be props related, but it might be. I might be set into lighting or sound or video or something like that. And I have to know my stuff in order to be helpful and a good stagehand. It's important to note that the union is not your employer. CBAs vary by venue, be it type like industrial or affiliation like Broadway and in city programming or Live Nation. So that's a thing. So just because you're working at the same venue as last time, there may be a different boss or a different entity paying you. The CBA will likely be the same for both gigs. I think almost assuredly are because of the venue. It would be like of the venue. Sometimes CBAs mention that when you are in a certain place, you will work under that venue CBA. For instance, I work at the Joffrey, and when we work at the Lyric Opera in Chicago, we work under a modified version of their CBA. So I could work there for 5 days during the week, and then I could work under my CBA at Joffrey and not get paid overtime because I'm working it for a different CBA, which is sneaky, not awesome, but so it goes. Now the prop job. What is the extent of the props role in IA theaters and venues? Now this varies. We'll get to that in a little bit. Natalie's going to talk for a little bit about other things, but it depends on the role. Half of my time is in a shop format. So working in a shop, building the show, doing the research and other stuff. And the other half is running shows and setting up things. So props, of course, we're in charge of all the props, but we're also typically in charge of orchestra or backline, flooring, and dance. We lay Marley, and the Marley is our responsibility. We have to make sure it's clean and it's taped correctly, and that sort of thing. Most janitorial tasks including trash, sweeping, and mopping. So it's kind of funny. It took me a second to figure it out, but if it has to do with things, it's props. So trash is things. So you got to take care of those things and put them somewhere else. If you have catering or something like that, it's very common for the prop team to set up tables and chairs. And house organization as well, like changing out house seats depending on accessibility or cameras. That's often the props job. So you got to know all of the ins and outs of how to change out theater seats. Quick changes, pipe and drape, all of that, any of that kind of setup is also a props job. But really, the actual job, and this is most important for when you start anything, is to show up on time, show up on time, and then bring tools. Is very common: a C-wrench, gloves, a knife, a Sharpie, other tools as needed. You should get some information from your steward about what the job entails, and they may request you to bring tools, and then you may show up the first day and not have the tools you need, but you should bring them the next day. And now I'm just gonna jot in here, Lori, do you want to talk really quick about like being in the right place at the right time and how you sort of became, like, because you were doing the right things, how that landed you in the union?
No understanding what Cass said about being ready to do anything, because you do not know when and where you're going to get called. In my early days in Local 16, because I lived in the city, I tended to get, "What are you doing now?" calls. "You're late." And I'd run over to one of the theaters because somebody didn't show up. And so you really have to, it's very hard to specialize. You can't say, well, I only do props. As a prop head, on the other hand, that can be a problem too, because the skills that are needed for a prop shop, for example, isn't what you'll necessarily what you'll get when you call the hall for more people. So you're not necessarily going to get someone who can make pillows or upholster. And it's really hard to get the local to take some of those kinds of skills seriously. In fact, they're so busy trying to fill giant AV calls that they barely deal with building at all anymore. It's it's a two-way street. In terms of being in the right place at the right time, I was talking before about when Industrial Light and Magic got organized, that they were really fussy about it. They didn't want to organize. They were special. They were better than that. On the other hand, whenever there wasn't work, and as ILM started to do less and less over the years, the union members were able to get work elsewhere. So I was able to bring a lot of them into the opera to build stuff because I knew what their model making skills had been when I was able to go work in the model shop there. And so it opens doors. The more opportunity you get to work in as many different areas and as many different venues as you possibly can, the better off you'll be. And
Yeah, especially because I had someone actually this past week work with me in a prop. We were sorting hay, which is not fun necessarily for everybody, but one of the guys that I was with just DGAF, and that doesn't give a flip, but like you need to care. And I think that's another thing that Lori's saying is that you have to do it with your whole self. Don't try to be cool. Like if your hands aren't working and they're in your pockets, that's no
Oh
good.
yeah,
No good for
the
you.
hands
No
out the
pockets.
pocket.
I have
The
to say
department
that
heads notice all this, by
Yeah.
the way. Department heads at the venues know.
So I'm gonna go to Karin real quick. Karin, will you tell us about the Guthrie setup and how it's a little different than what we're talking about?
As I find that unmute button. Yeah, so the Guthrie and actually a couple of other big regionals here in the Minnesota area are a little different. We are a pure traditional, what you think of as a prop shop. I'm the prop director. I run the shop. The whole needing to care and do your job thing still stands, but I have a team of SFTs or seasonal full-time staff. There are 4 of them on staff with me that are contracted for the season, just like you would if you were applying for any other prop shop. So, and they'll have different titles. We have a head prop artisan. He actually does specialize. He specializes in soft goods, casting and molding, and craft work. I have a prop shop coordinator who helps kind of organize the shop, but is also our primary engineer and kind of prop carpenter. I have a shopper buyer who also does some artisan work, and then I have a prop artisan, and they're with me for a minimum per the CBA, a minimum number of weeks per year. They usually get a little bit more than that. And then when we need to hire additional union members in to help get this stuff built, right now we're building a production of Sleuth, and we need more than our 4 people. So instead of putting in a call to the hall to get more people, we actually have a running overhire list of union members and people who've worked in our shop, and I'll put out a call to them, and that call will specify all the stuff that the union would ask for. It says what the project is, what the skills needed are, what the pay rate is, what the date is or set of dates are, what the hours worked are, and all of that information. That call goes out. I give a time limit, like respond by end of day Wednesday, and I'll let folks know who's going to be joining us on Thursday. And then that who gets the call is very much about departmental seniority. So who in the Guthrie prop shop has departmental seniority. There are other theaters in the Twin Cities who work in a very similar format. If we get into a pension, nobody on our lists responds, then we would call the hall and say, hey, do you have anybody with these skills? We need them for this amount of time. So it's a little bit different in that they can specialize. So
Right, right, great. And then Natalie, you of course have a different perspective altogether, being in the Canada scene. Tell us more.
Well, just in terms of actual employment, my setup is very, very similar to Karen's, in that I'm in a traditional regional theater. I'm a seasonal employee. So I'm hired under our collective bargaining agreement for a minimum of, I think it's 31 or 32 weeks a year. My colleague, we're a two-person department, is on minimum 28 weeks a year. We typically work more than that, but as stipulated in our union agreement, that's the minimum amount of time that we have to be employed every season. The difference between us and the Guthrie is that me, as the head of the props department, I am under the union contract. Um, there are a couple of places that have this set up. I think more so in Canada than in the US. I'm not familiar with any regional theater in the US that has that set up, although they may exist and maybe somebody knows one. The reasoning behind this is that so you cannot be in the union if you have management, right, if you have management abilities, I guess. So I, at my employer, cannot technically fire or hire anybody. I don't set my budgets. I don't, but it's really the hiring and firing and like disciplinary management level things that I don't have those under my role as the head of my department. So production management at my theater hires all of the people that work, hired me, hired my assistant, and would hire anybody else. But I mean, in terms of like bringing people on for union work and that, I certainly have a say and do the majority of that hiring. I just don't like have the top level management title, I guess. Um, so speaking to a little bit what Karin was talking about, I think what's confusing to a lot of folks when they first start investigating to the union, a lot of us are familiar with the stagehand side of the union, joining a local, gigging around, working, like Cass's role in the union. The other side of working in things is where Karin and I are, which is you're hired as an employee under a union contract at a specific employer for a long period of time in a shop environment. So at the theater that I'm at, there are multiple locals working. So I'm hired under one local in the prop shop, and that's where my jurisdiction is. We build the shows, but then there's another local that actually runs the shows. So I sort of do half of Cass's job on the building side, and then I have a counterpart in a different local who's running the props during the show. And once they're on stage, they're under that local's jurisdiction. And then if they break and there's time, they come back into my jurisdiction. I fix them, they go back on stage, blah, blah, blah. So it is complicated in that there are many different roles and many different setups that the IA covers that folks don't always think of when they're starting out. Just a couple of other really quick things I'm going to touch on in terms of being in Canada. So just an interesting thing that I discovered in prepping for this is that in Canada, nearly 30% of Canadians are in a union compared to 9.4% in the US. So unions are pretty respected here generally, and although union membership across the board in North America has reduced since I think the 70s, the right to joining a union, the right to collective bargaining and to strike is codified in Canada's constitution. So most employers do take unionizing quite seriously and don't fight it. And most provinces have fairly straightforward laws in terms of if the majority of people sign a membership card to join the union, They get certified right away. There's not a secret ballot election and a more of a complex process that there is sometimes in the US. And Canadian law mandates that all employers in a bargaining unit pay dues to the union, even if they choose not to join it, which is contrary to the right to work setup in the US. So just an interesting difference
Yeah,
there.
that's great. Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left. And I want to get to as much stuff as possible. Um, I why don't we talk a little bit about working for a union versus alongside one? Because that kind of was a nice transition from you, Natalie. Monique, can you give us a little bit on that? And then we'll kind of shift around everybody, tell some stories.
Yeah, just briefly, because I did go to work as the I forget what the title was, manager, head, whatever it was, at the Village Theater in Issaquah, Washington. And I was under the bargaining unit, and it became evident over the course of my first year and a half or so there that it couldn't work that way. And so I actually wanted to be out of the unit because they didn't want to pay me to sit there and listen to them talk at the tech table. And I couldn't shift my hours at all because I was on CBA and I had to be, and I didn't mind at the time, but I don't think I would have done that now. I don't know. But anyway, so I have been both. I've been in and out of that. But yeah, something to say about what you mentioned, Natalie. You said something about in Canada it's easier. I would say I've taken collective bargaining and under from a guy who was he was the attorney for Local 1 for 25 years. And he does comment on the fact that our union, our entertainment business, recognition is generally more forthcoming from employers because of what we do is so specific. So it's a little less. And also that we're talking about the tool list earlier. It's in our Constitution, the tool list. So when you sign and take that oath, that tool list, it goes with you. But anyway, and always remember, as we talk about all of these things, each local is different. Home rule will always be, if it goes to the IA, home rule will always be respected. So anyway, but working alongside them, yeah, I mean, you know, it depends. Again, it goes back to it's the local. I mean, there's good and bad in nearly everyone I've been to. And I will say that in my travels across the country, that Local 21 was the first one where when I asked about like, hey, how about you? That they were like, oh yeah, here's the information. No other local, yeah, no other local ever was like, they were always like, what are you talking about? We're not going to tell you about how to join, But I hope those days are gone for
Yeah.
all locals everywhere. But so
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
there were a couple of questions in the chat from Patrick about non-union work for a union worker and stuff like that.
Mm.
I'm going to put my little 2 cents in that, which is kind of related. So I continue to work as a referral, which means I'm recognized as useful for the local and I will get their rate and their benefits, but I cannot go to meetings and I cannot vote. My paycheck will take a percentage for the hall for like the dues. But they also pay into my vacation fund because if you work in my local, you get a little extra money for your vacations because we don't really get paid time off. So that's a little thing that I saw on my paycheck. And I was like, I don't get it. What's going on there?
That's very common. We have that. We have a
Yeah.
lot of that.
Cool. However, as far as I am aware, that does not reverse. Like you, as a union member, if you are hired as a contractor, you have to negotiate your own terms. The company that hired you has no obligation to follow the CBA because you are not working under that CBA at the time.
And
Does that
again, like to reiterate, the union is not your employer.
right?
So if you are a union member and you go work somewhere not covered by a collective bargaining agreement with your union, then you are not privy to any of those rates or rights or whatever. So any of us, even though we are card carrying member, or Monique and I, card carrying members of our locals, if we go work for another non-union theater in the area that isn't covered by our local and isn't covered by collective bargaining agreement.
My current job, my management or my full-time job, this treasurer job's a big job too. But anyway, that is at will. That's right.
But the
That's great.
union does, as we said earlier, help set a standard for
Yes.
working conditions and for wages. So you could take, as a member, you could say, look, this is what I get paid when I do work at XYZ
Yeah.
venue.
Mhm.
And now I am coming here and I'm negotiating my own contract
Yep.
separately. And I could say, this is my rate at the union. These are my vacation pay. This is what gets paid in my health insurance. Here's what I propose for this other gig that's not covered.
And it's important to know your CBA. And that's another thing about contracts is when you're a member and you're working under a CBA, you are entitled to have a copy of that and read it. You may or may not, depending upon the rules, be able to like take it out into the world, but you're allowed to read it and you should know it. If you don't ask, woe is you, because a lot of stuff will show up on your paycheck. Like,
And
what's
there,
this?
Well,
there are lots of CBAs available to read. So I will
Yep.
tell you now, you can go online to local 828's website. You can read every single one of our collective bargaining agreements. You can find out how much I make, how much vacation pay I make. It is all public on there, and a number of the locals have that information. If they don't, you can also contact a business agent and ask the question about seeing a CBA.
Yeah.
Ours is
Larry?
not public to
Larry?
non-members.
Oh, right. Yeah, same. Larry, were you going to say something?
yeah, I was going to throw something in regarding work as a studio mechanic because the CBA varies from film to film when you're working as a studio mechanic. But there are a couple of things that are standard. And one of the little weirdnesses that I ran into is working in a largely union state. When a non-union film came to the state and needed to shoot locations, because they were specific to the area. The film was required to hire union parity, meaning they had to bring in a certain number of union employees. And so I was put in the art department and working. And the guy who was the head of my department didn't realize that I had an 8-hour minimum per my CBA. So he tried to bring me in from 4 a.m. until 8 a.m. and then send me home until 4 p.m. and then have me come back in from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. and treat that as an 8-hour day. And I had to walk with him up to the producer's trailer and ask the line producer to give me the copy of the CBA and flip it and show him what the rule was and basically say, you're going to pay me for whatever it ended up being, a 12 or 16-hour day, however it shook out, even if you only want me for 8 hours. And I thought the guy's head was going to explode because he was from a non-union shop, non-union film, not used to this, and didn't realize that geez, if he had just unionized, he'd be making that dough too. But yeah,
Right.
there are times where you have to be aware of it because it's in the line producer and the executive producer's best interest if you don't know anything about it. So you don't know about meal penalties or you don't know about the minimum job requirements. The other thing that I was going to tag team in on was something that Lori said earlier, and I just have to hit it really hard as a theater person working in film and working also as a an 829 set designer, it cannot be stressed enough. Show up on time, be ready to work, listen to instructions, follow directions, and don't explain things to people who are your boss. Like, just understand that you're there to do what they need you to do, and they really don't need a rigging lesson from somebody who they hired as a day player. So that's super important. But then the other thing that came up recently for me as an 829 set designer, I am free to work pretty much anywhere. I can work at any non-union theater. The one, I guess, non-negotiable is I had a theater actually come to me and say, we have um, an 829 contract for our sound designer, our lighting designer, and our costume designer, but we've never done an 829 set designer. So what we are offering you is that we'll pay you your union wage and we'll write it as a union contract, but it won't actually be part of the union agreement. And I can't do that. That actually gets me thrown out of the union if I do that. And honestly, I said to the producer, I'm like, I don't understand why you can't just negotiate an agreement with the union. And it was because they didn't want to have to deal with the bookkeeping or whatever else it was. But that was a point where I called Matt Walsh in Chicago and specifically said, can I do this? And he was like, no, you cannot. Thanks for calling. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Great. We are running out of time. So let's see. What do we think we should cover real quick? Should we go to those questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So first, Patrick asks, how early in a career should a theater professional try to get a card? Does having a card make moving from around the theater company to theater company more difficult? I could speak to that just a little bit. My one of the men in my bargaining unit is in Local 1 in New York. He's been in Local 2 in Local 2 for 4 or 5 years, and they haven't given him a Local 2 card yet. And so there's definitely some feelings about that. But it is respected, but it might not be adopted. Yeah, Monique has opinions too. And I would also say that it's very tough to get, there's a lot of nepotism. So getting an in wherever it comes is good, and go check it out.
So
Anybody else?
yeah, so here's what I have to say about it, because I didn't get a card until I was in that position. So it can, I mean, it goes both ways, and I think it's individual. I had my career was all regional theater, and then I got a job at Paper Mill Playhouse originally as manager, left for a while, came back, and I was the the onstage prop head, and I got a card then. And it I mean, of course, it changed my life. Like, work was this big and my life got this big as opposed to the other way around with the other jobs. But I think that it's all personal. I don't think that there's a hard and fast rule about getting a card. I don't think that it should be pursued unless, especially in props, unless, you're like, I want to be an audio guy on rock and roll, and that's different. Go on. But I think in props, it depends entirely 100% on the venue and the local. So that's my advice on that.
And also like your career goals, where you want to
Yeah,
be. Like if
that's
you're
right.
dead set on staying and living in Chicago, then like maybe that where there are like multiple places to work
Yeah.
and versus, like if you're in one place, maybe get on the permit list for the union or get on the kind of, as it is, the overhire. Take some calls, see how you like it, if they need extra people, before pursuing it straight away. And then there's situations like mine where I got my card just by being hired as an employee of a unionized place. So it's really going to depend on what you're looking for in your career.
I'd
Go
like
ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say really quick, and just remember, just because you're a member of a union doesn't mean that you can't take non-union calls. So being a member of a union may open up more stuff to you, so you have two pools.
Yes, I
Sorry,
could
Lily,
not
go
say
ahead.
that more, because my opinions of 829, the scenic artists, not the set design, not the designers, is a little bit low because they kind of like make people think that around in New York anyway, and it's like, no,
Yeah,
no, no,
well,
no,
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 yeah.
I,
As
I
a
no.
have to say, I have to say that from the inside of a big union, Local 16 is big. It is one of the original Seven Sisters Union that gets to do whatever they want. So the times they are changing, and you may be one of the people that is helping that change. Even during the course of my executive board membership, we went from sort of being able to get away with kind of being a hiring hall, and then various legal things happened, and then we started to really have to define things, and that if you work for a certain amount of time, then you do get an invitation. And one of the things that Monique said at one point was that some unions require that you make a certain amount of money during a certain amount of time. That's for the health and welfare plan. That has to do with whether they can put you, whether they're getting enough money from your work to cover your health and welfare. So there are reasons for that as well. But little by little, it's been bending and bending and bending and bending to the point that if you are good and you want to work, you will get in. You will. It seems like you can't. And as someone that fought in many many cities and had all kinds of weird things, it's
Yeah,
changing. It's
yeah,
changing, and what you want to do is to can help that change along.
definitely.
Also, props
Yeah,
is very unique. So keep that, you
I
know.
also would like to mention that what Larry said earlier, that's why we need a union in the arts. That's why, because anybody will do anything to work on the movies,
Yeah.
anything, and they can be so easily abused.
Right. And actually, there was a pretty interesting story when I was first working at the Goodman Theater in Chicago before they had unionized, where there was a huge debate by the no longer working there TD about whether a work week was like the distinction of a work day versus a work week, and whether and something like he got into the weird backwards math of what constitutes 40 hours and can we make you work 2 20-hour days. And
yeah,
it was just ridiculous. It was one of those ridiculous things, but it's like this is literally why guys in top hats and monocles got, shoved around when unions were formed because they were trying to figure out ways to redefine what a week is. And it's like, no.
yes. Sometimes, depending on where I'm working, but sometimes if we work longer than an 8 hour day, the additional hours are overtime. And other times you build up to 40 hours depending on, you work three, however many hour days. And once you get to 40, everything additional after that is overtime. And, the different approaches definitely affect your paycheck.
Yeah.
All of our contracts are overtime past 8. There's not one that's a 40, not one.
It's law.
Cool. So real quick, I think, Alex, you had a question about young technicians. I think that still, like, kind of what we're saying is that the union ideas are later. The craft is what we are building and have built and make us good union members. But I definitely want to address Megan's question. Can you make it in this day and age without joining a union? I can tell you, I joined the union and I'm making enough money to sustain myself now. That's amazing. I want to join the union. I want to get my card because of job security. Um, as long as unions are still, go unions. Um, so that's my approach. I was doing okay before the pandemic, but I don't know. I don't really know what's up now. Anybody else want to jump in about that?
Well, there's a question there about shadowing and volunteering in that. Like
Oh,
typically, in union environments, my experience, you can't perform any actual work if you're
no,
not there as a member of
we
the
would not
union
allow that
or a
either.
permit. Yeah, we would not allow that either. So there are, within my local, there's a number of training programs in the area that have work placements, and they get sent to some of our industrial shops and some of our regional theater shops. Those students observe work, and then they often will do work alongside a union member doing sort of like a shadow project. So we might be painting a flat, and then they've got a canvas set up and they're practicing the same technique, but they're not actually working on the show. So that is how some shops set up shadowing or training opportunities. Um, but it's going to depend local to local. Like we said earlier, there's some apprentice programs, there are some training programs. So speaking to your local specifically is going to be the best way to find out what those opportunities are because they're going to be different
Yeah.
everywhere.
That's
And
true. And also like,
just
because there are different jurisdictions for different unions, like our stage management and dancers are in the same union. And we have people come in and shadow stage management a lot, but that's their own thing that they do. And they just shadow. They obviously don't run.
yeah.
I would
I would
say
just say
to
about
keep nud-
oh,
I would say that it's worth continuing to nudge your union too, just because they do need to have more training opportunities, and most unions
always.
realize that.
And I would say as far as like joining union and your life, from my point of view, in regional theater work, which is what SPAM mostly is, I spent so much of my life working for those damn places. And it wasn't until I worked under a collective bargaining agreement as a stagehand that my job finally shrank to a manageable, life allowing proportion. And I also, and to this day, I remember every minute of my time has a dollar figure attached to it. And it never was before. And no production manager of any regional theater ever treated me that way until then. So that's my little crusade,
Yeah,
but it's true. So
right. Um, Anybody have any last thoughts real quick? I'm just gonna
Well, I'm
walk
looking
us
at
out
the
here.
question about advice for finding set deco work for film and TV, which is probably another whole SPMinar. I don't know that we
Truly.
can answer that in this one.
I
Yeah, we'll take a
actually,
vote.
I sent a private message to that person and
Okay, good.
basically said, state and city film commissions are probably a good place to put your resume on a list and just get your name out there. And then Lori, to what we talked about, don't jump on something just because it's there, because a bad experience can be as bad for your reputation as a good experience. So most major film companies will put out feelers with local film commissions and reach out to people, and most local film commissions will have a place to put your name, your contact information, your website, and your CV, to be reviewed by people who are hiring. It's how I got called out of the blue living in Oklahoma for Killers of the Flower Moon, just because my name was on a list somewhere.
And
And then
keep
they wanted
nudging your
to,
union.
what's that?
Keep nudging your union.
Yeah, exactly.
When a movie comes into town, they will need those resumes that are.
Yeah, I mean, that can't hurt if you can find out. Like when I moved to Texas, I found out who the business agent for the studio mechanics was, got his email address, and just said, "Hey, I'm moving to Texas and I want to join your local. What do we do?" And he was able to help me. So that's another thing that might be available on union websites, is just a way to put your name on a list.
Sure. Karen, you had something to say?
Yeah, I want to plug two things. One, we actually did a whole spaminar on this. Larry did a whole spaminar on prop adjacent careers, specifically on film work. So I encourage you to go check our YouTube channel for that. It was about, what, 2.5 years ago, I think? But it's definitely on our YouTube channel. And two, um, Patrick said in the chat, reaching out to the local BA and any other BAs in the area are a plus. I want to say this. I know that cold calling people is scary. I am an extrovert introvert. Being on screen, not my jam. Um,
But
but
do it.
if but yeah, if we don't know you're out there, and this goes for union, non-union, all of it. If we don't know you're out there, then we can't hire you. So reach out to your BAs, reach out to the people who work in the theaters, reach out to if you're looking for contract shops to build big, cool, because I know there's a big one in Vegas that has done like Super Bowl halftime shows. Let them know you're there and ask them if you're not comfortable in your skills yet, ask them what shadowing opportunities might be, or just say, can I just come in for a couple hours and just see your facilities? Can you give me a tour? Every point of contact is going to lead you to hopefully future work, right? Let us know you're there.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Karin. I'm sorry if we didn't get to all your questions, but thank you for joining us tonight. There's nothing better than building a little collective knowledge. We have more SPMinars in the works, so please keep your eye out for announcements and definitely keep those topic suggestions coming. We want to hear what you want to learn about.
If anybody wants to know more, reach out to me.
Yeah.
Local21treasure@outlook.com. I'll put it in the chat.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. If you're a working prop manager in a nonprofit theater, opera, children's theater, or an educator teaching props, we'd love you to join SPAM. Just head to our website or click the link in the chat to sign up. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and those links are in the chat as well. Definitely check out Larry's YouTube, the SPMinar that he did. And also a big shout out to SPAM and our amazing members who make these sessions happen. Patrick Drone, Ben Homan, Nikki Kulas, Jen McClure, Amy Peter, Sarah Pugh, and Karin Rabe. Thank you so much for joining us. Prop on, and we'll see you next time.